Hello, welcome to this special testimony time. And tonight it's something different. Instead of speaking or interviewing somebody more specifically, I'm going to share with you one I consider one of the most traumatic times that happened in my life, and an amazing, I consider it an amazing testimony. And so I'd like just to share this with you this evening. Now, as you can see in my background tonight is one of the Olympics. And as we know, in a couple of weeks' time, um, the Olympics, or just 2 or 3 weeks anyway, the Olympics is going to be starting, sadly with no spectators. And it just brought me to mind of an amazing trip to the Olympic Games in 1972. And at that point, in the 71 through 73, I was at Bible school, and we come to the summer recess, and I was praying about what to do for the recess, and different people going to different places, and I was praying about where I could go, what I could do. And I heard that a group called Youth of the Mission were going to go and do an outreach in the Olympic Games. I thought that would be great to do that. But anyway, as the term finished, I'd heard that the YWAM, Youth of the Mission, as it was known, was planning to do some missions. And one of my friends had been involved in a previous year. So he says, why don't you go along there? And I thought, okay, I'll do that. But at that point, I needed a suitcase. And I was walking along, and I saw there was a car advertised for sale for £40. Well, I didn't have that, but so I went and spoke to the person, and he sold it me for £25. It was a 100E Angular with Angular 100, that's it, with 3 gears, which was, quite difficult when you're used to 4 gears, especially when you put it in, you think you're going forward and you put it in reverse, which can be fairly dramatic. But anyway, managed to survive that. So I went to the headquarters of Youth of Mission at that time. It was in Vermont Road, I think, somewhere in London. And I met all these Christians, and they were quite an amazing bunch from all over the world, talking about going to see somebody in Afghanistan and then in Peru. And I thought, wow, how did they do all this? And I spoke to one of the leaders. One of the leaders says, well, it's very interesting. He says, it's all it is. He says, we believe that where God guides, he provides. Well, the other aspect of what they said was where he leads, he feeds. Anyway, um, one of the places that they were going to do an outreach was Scotland. And because I had got this car now, I was able to travel. So they says to me, okay, we'll give you a team and you can go to Scotland. And that's what happened. So I've always had a desire for Scotland, and it's still there. That's why I'm still here now. And so that was the first time we came to Scotland, and we did this great outreach in Scotland, and it was really, that was a tremendous time in itself, and maybe scope for another testimony. But after that summer missions had finished up here, there was one or two were going to go down, and they were going to the Olympics, and I thought, well, why not? So I thought, I'll just go by faith. And so I had my wee car and I set off. And on the way, the car didn't go very fast. I remember giving this um, hitchhiker a lift. Now, he was Spanish and he couldn't speak English, and I couldn't speak Spanish. So there we are, trundling along. And I actually fell asleep at the wheel. But this Spanish guy had the presence of mind to get hold of the wheel. Wake up, wake up. Okay, yes, yes, thank you very much. And so I thought, oh, I'll have to try and get a bit quicker than this. So I put my foot on it, and the next few minutes, then there was this big rumbling in the engine and a big bang. And the guy said, stop, stop. I says, well, I couldn't do anything else but stop. So I stopped, and off he went hitchhiking, and I was stuck. But I felt the Lord was with me on this, so I kind of prayed, says, well, what do I do now? And then this lorry guy stopped, or van driver, says, you in trouble, mate? I says, aye. Oh, I'll tow you off. So he towed me off. And then probably it was about 5 in the evening, something like that. And he dropped me where these petrol pumps were. And there was a guy working on the petrol pumps. So, okay, I'll just go over to him. And I says, I'm in trouble. My car's broken down. He says, oh, hang on, I'll have a come and have a look. I'll fix these pump first. So he came over, he saw the situation, and then he says, come with me. So then we went driving down these back street garages, really, in well, not garages so much as just backyard things, really, where people were working on things. And came to this one place where this guy was working on this car, well, the engine, and it apparently turned out to be an engine just like mine. And then I watched him as he removed, because what had happened, the actual pulley had sheared off, and so that was it, and the time belt and everything else. So he went to this car and he saw it was a similar engine to mine. He began to dismantle it, take the parts off, came back to my car and he began to work on it. I thought, oh, really? I wonder what this was going to cost as well. But I tried to witness to him, but he wouldn't let me do that. And he went along and he took the whole part off, the old part, replaced it, and the block tap and everything. And I thought, wow. And then he says, well, how much is that? He says, nothing, off you go. I thought, what? And off we went. I think, well, in hindsight, I think he was an angel, really. It must have been incredible. It was just amazing. So then I carried on my journey. And what I was hoping to do was leave my car in London and kind of hitchhike from there, really. But I remember going to this, it was a Sunday as I was going through London. And I thought, oh no, just before a Sunday, I went into a church car park, big church car park. And I thought, I'll ring up the minister and tell him what I'm going to do and if it's okay to leave the car. But he said, no way, you can't do that there. We need the space for a Sunday. But I'm going to do the Lord's work. And I don't care less, off you go. So that was it. And so then I got down to Dover and I thought, well, I'm going to leave my car. And I found this bit of, it was like a building site, but other cars were all parked around. So I thought, I'll leave my car there. So then after that, I hitchhiked, which was quite a challenging thing, into Europe and down to Germany, and came to this place where the Youth of the Mission outreach was, in a place called Augsburg. Now, they just got this castle. Now, what I'm going to do for the rest of this testimony is, because as I was just doing a bit of research, after the Olympics, my friend and I, there was a film made by Youth of the Mission about this outreach. And many, many years ago, I've never had a copy. I've tried to find it before, but now I actually found it. Just the other night, I found a copy of this film. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you extracts as I go through, and I'll talk over it, some of it, and just show you some of it, give you a sense of the atmosphere and the feeling. And of course, the main thing that happened in 72 and why it's so significant, it was because of the attack and the killing of the Israeli athletes. Incredibly dramatic, incredible, and what happened with Black September and what they did. So when they come to that, I'll explain a little bit more about what happened at that point. But what I'm going to do now, I'm going to actually share the screen, and this is going to show you now extracts as we move along from this film. I'm just hoping that it won't infringe any kind of copyright. Well, I hope not. Well, so let's see. And it starts here where, because all this was taken live at the time, and this was when they were explaining how they got the actual castle in Augsburg.
The story of the miracle of the castle, how God made it available as headquarters for the Munich outreach, and later for a Youth with a Mission, or YWAM, School of Evangelism, is a tremendous example of God's mighty provision. Seeking for a place to locate their printing plant for the Munich outreach, two young men spotted the completely renovated and modernized 16th century castle and called the YWAM leaders. Within 5 days after the signing of the contract, the down payment came in, without any letters or appeals to the public. Only a handful of Christians knew and were praying. The huge, spacious attics and every room of the castle, plus a tent city outside, were soon crammed with workers.
And it was cramped too. You can see, I remember this, you know, when you're all cramped.
A member of parliament of a major nation shared
About
one of the tents
2,000
with
of
younger
us there.
members of the
I think
Jesus
something like
Revolution.
that was the numbers. Yes, that's how it was when you're trying to get into you've been on camps and now and different things. It can be really quite something. Brings back memories looking at these things. And then, as you see here,
every room in the castle was full. The grounds were teeming with young people, but nothing was permitted to crowd out time spent alone with the master.
There was that time for the personal devotions and the preparations. And then
the food wasn't always fancy, but there was always enough.
It's gloriously possible.
And then there was incredible teachers. They were very good. This is a lady called Joy Dawson.
It's the fear of God. That's to hate evil. It's gloriously possible. The message is practical.
God plenteously supplied inspirational food through such spiritual leaders as Joy Dawson and Loren Cunningham.
There were 50,000 young people that were marching through the streets of Moscow, Russia, and they were chanting this slogan: "We're ragged and we're poor, but we're changing the world." I would to God that would have been 50,000 Christian young people that might say we're ragged and poor. That part doesn't matter, but we're changing the world for the cause of Christ. But now we are seeing young people as they're marching now on every continent of the world that are truly changing the world for the cause of Christ. Violent revolution with hatred, fear, destruction, bloodshed, I believe, began in heaven itself. It began by one called Lucifer, who revolted against God. He brought his revolution to earth, but God has enlisted us in a counter-revolution. This is a revolution of love. And this revolution is headed up by none other than Jesus Christ himself. This is the true Jesus revolution. To be a part of this revolution, we must have the same motive that God had. We must have the same method that God used. And we must have the same message that God message of evangelism. If we're truly evangelizing, we will have God's motive. For God so loved the world. That's the motive of God. And the method of God, that he gave his only begotten Son. The message that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life.
So as you can see, there was really good teaching. But I'd like to show you this testimony of an incredible lady, Corrie Ten Boom.
The barbed wire of the German concentration camps was a symbol of suffering to thousands, including a wonderful Dutch woman, Corrie Ten Boom.
Once in Holland during the war, we heard that in a Jewish orphanage in Amsterdam, all the babies had to be killed because they were Jewish babies. I worked in the underground with boys and girls, teenagers, and I said to the boys, we must save the babies in an orphanage. And that day, they stole 100 babies. And my girls distributed them over 100 families. What a joy. One of my bravest boys was Piet Hartog. I said, Piet said to me, I think we do the most important work that exists, just saving lives. I said, Piet, I am so happy when I think of the babies we have saved, but there is a work that is more important, and that is not saving lives, but saving souls. Tell them about Jesus. Then Pete laughed and said, I'm a Christian boy, I go to church, I pray, I read the Bible, but telling people about Jesus, that's good business for my pastor. I said, Pete, in your lifetime will come a time that you see the most important work for you to save souls. Half a year later, he came into prison and heard that he had 1 week to live. The day before he was shot, he wrote us a letter. All the men and boys in my cell are sentenced to death. And what a joy that I could tell them that Jesus died for the sins of the whole world, also for their sins. And when they come to Jesus, they will become children of God. And when they are shot, they will go to the house of the Father. Now I know the most important thing is to win souls for Jesus. Young people, I have a message for you from Piet Hartog. Don't wait till the last week of your life like he has done. But start today and say, Lord, take my life from now on and use me.
It was an amazing testimony hearing Corrie Ten Boom. I had a friend, David, who went actually to meet her in the actual camp, and he says when he came into her presence, he just started to weep. It was because of the love of God just kind of oozed out of her. An incredible lady. And some of you may have seen the testimony. There's actually a film, you can watch it on YouTube, called No Hiding Place, which is a brilliant film of her life and what she did in Holland and in Germany in the concentration camps and afterwards. And this is that was when she was traveling around the world sharing her story. So I'll just move on and show you some of the other extracts now, and some of the other people who were there. Hopefully we'll get to. You can see some of the things. This was the singing in all the different languages.
While imprisoned in this very tower a few decades ago, Adolf Hitler wrote Mein Kampf, the book that launched a reign of terror upon much of Europe. Now, a few yards away, youth with a mission presses pound away 24 hours a day, turning out a different kind of literature with a message that sets people free. Millions of Gospels of John, illustrated biblical booklets, all of this in many major languages, financed by concerned individuals and groups such as Life's Messengers, Christ for the Nation, Chick Publications, and others.
The very same place as Mein Kampf was written now is a message of God's love and of the Word of God. It's just amazing how God uses things. Now what we did every day, go from the castle from Augsburg into Germany, taking up the buses to the station, and then, as you say, waiting for the trains. We'll be singing all these incredible songs. Just a wonderful atmosphere. You can imagine what it was like. It's terrific. Yes, the joy was real. Okay, and then the trains would come along. On the train, and then we do
Zambia,
witnessing into the park in.
When the language barrier became too complicated, good literature was invaluable.
And it shows you that Jesus loves you. Jesus does not want you to be like that man. He does not want.
Jesus said, "Whoever drinks of this water shall never thirst again." During these days, hundreds found Jesus as their personal living water, and the street became their chapel. Thousands of visitors from communist nations were
There's a man
contacted on
called
the
George
streets
Fowler, who I
and
know became
gladly
a personal
received
friend.
Bibles and
Still know him.
Gospels
He's in
in
America
their own
now.
language.
You've heard the Jesus people?
Yeah, not Jesus people, yeah. Materialist, you know.
You what?
Atheist and materialist.
You're materialist.
My first language, it was Russian. And since a child, I have a burden in my heart for all those people that they are from, or they are behind the Iron Curtain. But now I find out that the doors, they were always open, because to God nothing is impossible. And today I have the opportunity to come and participate in this Munich outreach, where I meet many of those people that they come from the communist countries. And I meet one particular man with whom I share Christ. And while we were reading the Bible, the Word of God, God put conviction in his heart, and he could see the reality of the life, the reality of God. And this man was crying, and he was asking me what I must do to accept Christ. And he accepted Christ in his heart. And I gave him a Bible in his own Russian language. And he was so thankful. He wanted to pay me for that, but I told him that that is free. And he couldn't believe it, because the Bibles in Russia are very, very expensive. And he was happy and thankful, not only to me, but to God too, because he met him there.
Every single scene in this story was filmed on location, including the times of sharing Christ with the communist visitors to the Olympics. But at the team's request, no pictures were taken of the visitors as they accepted Bibles and quickly stuffed them into their jackets, their purses, or duffel bags to carry home with them to Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, to Albania, Russia, or any of the other nations where they're unable to get Bibles today. The outreach momentum was quickening. New converts were added daily. A leading communist was converted, then another. Munich was beginning to feel the impact of the Jesus revolutionaries.
I was living in Morocco.
Yes, there's the
Very involved in Eastern religions.
it's
and
quite a
even
number of
teaching out
testimonies there, but
YWAM team.
I'll just move.
Peace without violence. And I have been praying for Northern Ireland, and I believe that the answer to the problems is Jesus.
The 37 Christian organizations that combined for this outreach met for fellowship and training in a downtown Munich church.
And here you'll see in a moment, this is Brother Andrew.
Communism is the devil's first organized attempt worldwide.
Und der Kommunismus ist die erste Zielsetzung des Feindes heute weltweit.
To exterminate the Church of Christ.
Die Gemeinde Jesu Christi auszulöschen.
Under a political cloak.
Unter einem politischen Mantel.
With the most cruel methods.
Mit den bösesten Methoden.
Now I said there have been persecutions before.
Und ich habe gesagt, es hat schon vorher Verfolgungen gegeben.
But never in history have we seen a worldwide movement.
Aber nie in der Geschichte haben wir eine weltweite Bewegung gesehen.
Which literally reaches the whole world.
Die tatsächlich die ganze Welt erreicht.
And plans to reach the whole world.
Und plant die ganze Welt zu erreichen.
And plans to conquer the whole world.
Und plant die ganze Welt einzunehmen.
And plans to change the whole world.
Und die ganze Welt zu verändern.
And to exterminate the Church of Christ in the whole world.
Und die Gemeinde Jesu Christi in der ganzen Welt auszulöschen.
We are right in the middle of the battle here.
Denn wir sind gerade hier in der Mitte der Schlacht.
There's already this political protest demonstration going on right now in Munich.
Gerade jetzt da finden politische Demonstrationen hier in München statt.
We have another message.
Wir haben eine andere Botschaft.
And that's a revolution of love.
Es ist eine Revolution der Liebe.
And that's the people that point the one way to Jesus.
Und während die Leute das Einwegzeichen zu Jesus machen.
The exotic English gardens were
incredible if you've ever written Brother Andrew's books, but what he was saying there is even more so now as we saw where, and that is what's happening 50 years later, much more advanced, but Anyway, I'll just carry on a bit more.
The hub of the counterculture and Marxist youth, and a natural place for the Christian young people to share how they'd found the Prince of Peace. Europeans hearing the gospel from Africans, Japanese hearing from Americans. The message was the same in any language: love, Jesus love. The revolution of hate and fear also uses songs, but somehow the spirit is so different.
Incredible songs. This is the other groups. Used to give, that was what they called the Jesus cheer. I know I'm there somewhere. I'm not sure if this was me, but
sometimes the revolution of hate clashed openly with the revolution of love. The most powerful force every time was love. As they jabbed their fists against the sky, it was evident that their revolution was neither against man, nor was it political. It was against the God of heaven.
yes.
Noah, some very talented...
Just move on.
I was busted a couple...
And the stakes were eternal. For many, such as those from Mongolia, Albania, North Korea, and Cuba, it was a rare opportunity, perhaps their only chance to hear the truth about Jesus and his revolution. Athletes, trainers, and tourists from every nation under heaven heard the story and felt the love of God, maybe for the first time in their lives. For those who turned to Christ, it was the beginning of a new life. Even those who resisted had come in contact with God's love.
As a Korean from Sancheong in Korea, I have Jesus Christ in my heart. I am here in Munich to share Jesus Christ with other Asians. Already I've talked to Koreans in the Olympic grounds. They are very open. And I have been able to lead a Korean boy to Jesus Christ at the Olympics.
Heaven recorded scenes like these, which were repeated daily.
Coming from Chicago out of a Jewish background and having found Christ as my Messiah, I had the privilege of sharing with an elderly German man at the Olympic grounds the reality of my faith. The man had experienced 2 world wars, had seen much suffering, and was a very bitter man as he looked over life. And as I shared my faith with him, he could only be lost in his bitterness and in his sadness and questions. But when I was able to share with him that I came from a Jewish background, that my relatives had suffered in the concentration camps, but as a result of my faith, I was able to forgive and love people who had done this, I took on a new dimension of thinking and became very interested and asked me questions deeper about the reality of Jesus and walked away thinking very seriously.
I'm from Cambridge University, and when we heard about the outreach in the Munich Olympic Games, we were led by the Lord to pray for and buy a double-decker bus from London. We've been using on the streets of Munich to witness to the living Jesus Christ. On the side of our bus, in many languages, we have Jesus Christ is Lord. And it's been a thrill to see Russians reading in their own language, Jesus Christ is Lord.
My name is Luis Balmaceda, and I was born in Puerto Padre, Cuba. I am Cuban. I've come here to Munich to share Jesus with many Latin American and Spanish-speaking people. Yesterday, I was in the living quarters of the Cuban athletic team in the Olympic Village, and I had the opportunity to share Jesus with them.
The Christians climbed up the hill overlooking Olympic Stadium in a...
Just reflecting on this picture which you see there now, I remember being up at the hill just at this point, and there was a couple up there, and they had been so upset because before this, as they were talking about, there were many revolutionary groups, many weird things going on, and very anarchistic, some of the things. And when they saw this massive group of people come along and singing and things, they think, oh no, not another group. But then, as they heard and as they saw that this was Christians and it was expressing the love of God, they just melted. They thought, oh, because it was such a relief. And to know there's love where there is hatred. And as it says, this whole thing is called the revolution of love. I'll continue just playing some extracts. I hope you're enjoying these testimonies, amazing testimonies of Arabs, of Jews, from all over the world, and coming together.
A giant march on the opening night of the Games.
Hallelujah.
As darkness fell, they made a cross of 1,000 lighted candles. And walked slowly down the hill toward the garishly lit stadium. Several thousand testimonies brought light to the world. At the last minute, the police officials shifted the Jesus Festival from the Olympic Hill, where it was originally scheduled, to a field outside the city of Munich. To disperse. At the same moment, they were preventing the Christians from staging an orderly demonstration for the Prince of Peace. The communists were beginning to riot in the center of the city. 56 policemen were injured, simply because they had kept the Jesus Patrol away. The world watched in horror when their best attempt at brotherhood, the Olympic Village, where athletes from around the world were to live in peace and harmony, exploded into a battlefield as a handful of Israeli athletes were taken hostage by Arab terrorists.
I'll just pause at that point because this was the most dramatic time. I was actually the team went into two teams when he said about there was 1,000, so there was 2,000 of us really. Each day we'd go out in different groups. So one day 1,000 would go into the city and another would stay back praying and doing intercession. And I was down there at this time when this was happening, and I was outside the gates there of the Olympic Village, and the helicopters are flying, the lights, it was all at night. It was just the most dramatic time. Meanwhile, back at the castle, the other teams were praying about what was going on, and it was all very uncertain at that time what was happening when the terrorist Black September had come in and to the Israeli section, and they'd killed 2 of the Israeli athletes then and took another 9 who were hostages. and then all kinds of negotiations were going to go on. But meanwhile, and I went back the following day and involved in intercession teams. And as we were praying, the general sense was that the Israeli athletes were going to be killed, even though there were false reports that they'd been set free. But we felt, no, that's not the case. And it was a terrible time when the Israelis athletes were killed. The actual German authorities just did a massive botch up. They got it incredibly wrong. And they hid all the evidence for about 20 years. And of course, it's come out later. And if you want to see what actually happened, Wikipedia has got a very good report about it all. And just an absolute tragedy. It was the most dramatic thing. And yet, as we'll see, as we come just to the conclusion of this, the video extracts, God worked it and used it for good. So I'll just play you a little bit more now.
But even this tragedy was turned into a blessing. While the memorial service for the murdered Israelis was taking place, the Christian young people quietly prayed on the streets. They sang, and they comforted the angry, confused public.
I was an Israeli tourist guide in Jerusalem when some young people presented me the gospel of Jesus. And now I'm here in Munich to guide people to Jesus. 2 days before, I was talking with an Israeli colonel and coach of the Israeli team. And we went through all the prophecies, and he saw that it was fulfilled in Jesus. And he even invited me in his home in Israel. And I was also in the privilege to bring a communist journalist to Jesus, who is coming to join us now in the effort for the Jesus Revolution.
I'm Egyptian, working with the United Nations, and all the time I worked there, something always stuck in my mind was that people coming from different nationalities and different religions had always something to suffer, something feeling for the truth. When I came to Munich in this outreach, I found out that people always looked for the same thing here. And I've seen people coming to Christ from the Buddhists, the communists, the Muslims, the nominal Christians, and they all found joy in Christ.
At last, the police gave in and permitted the Christians to march. They marched in sympathy for the Israeli victims, distributing 10,000 flowers to the people to illustrate to Munich and to the world that only in Jesus' love was there a real basis for brotherhood.
Beside the quiet stream, he keeps on giving life to me and helps me to do what honors him the most. Even when walking through the dark valley of death,
It was the most incredible
time. A so-called culture center in the middle of Olympic Park had been staging weird dramas with partial nudity and frenzied music. But this was shut down because of the massacre of the Israeli athletes. And the Christians were allowed to use this amphitheater to present truth for 4 days and nights, right in the center of the Olympic grounds. Thousands filled the seats of the amphitheater, and dozens made decisions for Jesus every day. A coffee bar run by Youth with a Mission near the university was the spiritual birthplace of many hundreds who crowded into the crossroads to hear of Jesus' love. The night after the tragic massacre, Israelis and Arabs were in the coffee bar being introduced to Christ. And that night, a Palestinian and a Jew each met the Messiah and became new spiritual brothers.
The man has nothing good in him, and you could not actually be good. And you remember in your life, I remember in my life that I have tried so many times to be good, but I couldn't make it. And if I could have made it without Christ, then why Christ? As you're just saying now. Yes. So when I came to know Christ, one thing I felt is that I am handicapped without God. I was trying to be good, but I just couldn't. Oh, there's the nature of sin that I have in me. But now then, in 2 Corinthians 5:17, this is...
One of the amazing things that happened in that time was that there was a camera crew walking down the Marienplatz, which means walking street, and they came across one of the Jewish team members. And so they asked her, what did she feel about the killings that had happened with the Arabs killing the Jews? And she says, what these people have done to the Israeli athletes, my brothers, she says, is terrible. But she says, but the love of Jesus in my heart enables me to forgive. And that was live on TV at the time. Just an incredible impact. And what the team did, they published a newspaper, and on the head of the newspaper there was a Jewish person, as you saw there in that coffee bar witness, and an Arab being reconciled together in Christ, sharing God's love of forgiveness and understanding. And it was incredibly powerful. Just come to a bit of the conclusion now, as we just see
I am yours today. I believe that we're either a missionary or a mission field. We're either a part of God's problem or a part of his answer. Jesus has said to each one of us, as the Father sent me, even so send I you. That means you are God's missionary wherever God sends you geographically. He promises us harder beds. He says, foxes have their holes, birds have their nests, but I don't even have a place to lay my head. Are you willing for the cause of world evangelism? He doesn't promise you more food. He promises you your needs. But at times, it won't even be as good as you like. He promises you at times more crowded conditions. At times, he promises you that you'll be arrested like he was arrested. He promises you, some of you, that you're going to die in order to get the gospel out. Jesus died, and almost all of the apostles died. But with those promises, let's notice that he also will promise us that we can reach an entire generation, every creature, and the promise is implicit in the commandment. When he says, I want you to go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature, that's your commandment.
Amazing. And again, that's just the last feed of the thousands. Like say 2,000, as far as you understand, were there. And yeah, most incredible time, one of the most amazing testimonies. And just for myself on a personal level, as we finished, one of the team who had flown there wasn't going back. And so in those days, she says, oh, Mike, I can give you my ticket if you want to fly back to London. And I says, absolutely. So that was great. And just she gave me her ticket. And it was quite interesting flying back on the plane, because we were in the airport where all the shooting had taken place and there were bullet holes everywhere in the actual airport. And I always remember as we actually flew back into London, everybody was cheering on the plane, you know, to get safely back. And then I had to get there back from there down to Dover. I hitchhiked back down there. I remember getting quite a dramatic ride on this motorbike. And then as I came to Dover, where my car was, and it was on top of a hill. I remember where the motorbike stopped, and I could see it down to Dover. And there was my car in glorious isolation in this, basically in this building site all by itself. I thought, oh no. Anyway, I got there and I checked the car, and I think the part I'd just taken the spark plug lead off one of the, and I stuck that back on, and it started, and it was fine. So I was able to get back safely. So very grateful. for that incredible testimony. Hope you've appreciated it. And if you want to see it, then it's on my timeline, the full story of that revolution of love. What happened the following year, actually, me and my friend, we actually took that film and we went around many churches around the country showing it, as that was an amazing testimony. So there you go, 49 years ago. So it has been great just to be able to find that again in the archives. I've looked before, not been able to find it. So, okay, well, God bless you. Hope you have appreciated the testimony, because they were very challenging. And I'll see you. I'll hand back to Mike now.